All right, I think we're about ready to get going here. We have pretty much all of our RSVPs are now participating, so thank you guys and ladies for joining us this morning. As I mentioned, this is DDM Marketing Communications is happy to put on this webinar on improving physician engagement and satisfaction. My name is John Gonda, and with me today is Jordan Bunning, and we'll give you a real quick bios here, and it's, my joke of the day is we obviously have faces for webinars, so you can see us on your screen here, but I have just over 2 decades of client-side healthcare marketing communications experience. I've been in the agency world just under 2 years, and before coming to DDM, I was most recently the Director of Marketing Communications for Spectrum Health here in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
I'm Jordan Bunning, one of the principals of DDM, and personally been involved in a lot of healthcare work over the years. That's kind of evolved from a lot of traditional activities, more traditional advertising campaigns, to a lot more complex content generating opportunities, a lot more back-end interactions with the organization, supporting them with referrals, supporting them with recruitment, and now getting a lot more into physician communication as well. A quick background on DDM. As a company, we're a full-service marketing and communications organization. We have been around for over 28 years, but a majority of that time we've been involved for about 25 years with some form of hospitals, physician groups, health systems, and we've learned a lot and we've done a lot. You know, our clients probably bring as much new knowledge and education to us as we're bringing to them with different skill sets in marketing and communications.
And specifically, our role is to help health and wellness clients meet their consumers where they are. And we create meaningful and desirable healthcare brands to help engage patients and physicians. And I think the one thing, as Jordan mentioned, and I touched on briefly, we do have a unique skill set when it comes to physician communications and marketing. And that's really, in the healthcare industry, is really a unique subset of tactics and knowledge, and we have partnered with several organizations to create content and campaigns that are designed to enhance physician engagement and satisfaction. Some of our service offerings, as Jordan mentioned, we are full service, but these are more specific to the healthcare industry, communications and marketing, patient acquisition campaigns, especially for primary care, service line marketing. We do offer digital strategies, executive and employee communications. Unfortunately, in the world of healthcare, there's often crisis communications needs. We assist with that. Media strategy, brand strategy, and we also have a lot of experience assisting with mergers, acquisitions, and integrations, and that seems to be happening more and more regularly within the industry. On this slide, just a few of our healthcare clients. There's probably a couple logos and brands up there that you are very familiar with. We work with these clients in a variety of different capacities throughout the years. Some of them very long-term clients, and some of them are newer to DDM. So, today's topic and why it matters, as mentioned, the title of this webinar is Improving Physician Engagement and Satisfaction. And to be very blunt and to the point, physician burnout is on the rise. And as physician burnout increases, patient care and volumes are negatively impacted. And this affects your revenue, reputation, and patient experience. The agenda, today we'll touch on a few different areas, and our goal is to really provide you with a high-level overview and discussion points, and then we'll have time for question and answers at the end. So as I mentioned, the webinar goes about 45 minutes. We'll talk for about 30 of that and then leave about 15 for the Q&A. But on the agenda, physician engagement, that's obviously our hot topic here. We'll also touch on some perceived challenges. We'll talk about designing goals and objectives. Also talk about the necessary research and data that you need for these efforts to be successful. We'll provide some suggested tactics and recommendations, as well as some anecdotes from some of our previous clients, what we've learned and what clients have learned from us. And finally, how to measure success. And I think the one point that I'll mention here is it is more than just quality and safety. Obviously, that's very key within healthcare, but to be successful, you have to monitor much more than that as it relates to physician engagement. Again, kind of the key headline there is physician burnout is on the rise. It's a really hot topic in recent articles. Modern Healthcare has done a lot of work on this. There's been numerous LinkedIn posts and blogs The American Medical Association is very interested in it, and trade journals and trade groups. And I think as it relates here, a consistent physician engagement and communication strategy, it helps lessen the levels of burnout and dissatisfaction within your organization, whether you're a hospital, a health system, or a medical group. But it also helps to increase the emotional connection between a hospital, medical group, and its providers. And that's very important. I think loyalty, an engaged physician is a happy physician, and that's something that we'll touch on as we go forward. We do want to speak to and view this topic through an industry-wide perspective. And physician engagement can be defined in many ways, but it is consistently recognized as a key measurement of the commitment and satisfaction of a medical staff. And what we believe, and I think this is based on some industry research, is physician engagement can be impacted by three main areas. The first of which is the organizational administration and organizational leadership, the physician and medical group culture, and then the actual physician leadership within the medical staff or the medical group. Within the industry, this is somewhat controversial of a topic, but I think it's debatable, and it's important to bring up here, is that some people do believe that investment in a physician engagement strategy will likely accomplish better return than a traditional marketing campaign or efforts. And it's also expected to have a longer lifespan among these target audiences. Now, as I mentioned, this could be controversial and debatable, and I think the one thing that Jordan and I feel strongly about is we're not recommending an either-or. It's something very much in combination and in support and in conjunction of. And that's something, I think Jordan has seen that, throughout his career especially, and I'll let him provide some anecdotes of how they work in conjunction with one another.
One of the things to reinforce when we talk about that is, as John mentioned, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. And one of the things that we'll continue to share is just reinforcement of transparency, that the organization's motives and the goals of appropriate physician engagement can be shared. It is an effort and an investment within the organization to be able to make that happen, and it requires trust. But those are some things that we'll kind of walk through along the way.
Pretty powerful, but also simple headline here. Physician engagement, it equals increased success. Engagement strategies are vital to an organization's success, and as I joked earlier, engaged physicians are happy physicians, and I think we all know that physicians like to give their opinions, they like to be asked their opinion, and throughout my years working in health systems, the one joke that would often be shared amongst the operational administration is if you ask 10 physicians, you put 10 physicians in a room and ask them each for their opinion, you'll get 15 different opinions from the 10 different physicians. And it's something that's just very, it's just the nature of healthcare, and I think that's something that physicians love to be involved in enhancing quality of care, and they appreciate the opportunity to help lower costs with increased efficiencies, and ultimately, improve patient safety.
Physician engagement equaling increased success is shown that highly engaged physicians positively impact employee retention and recruitment rates. Gallup surveys have reported an estimated 26% increase in productivity for engaged physicians versus disengaged physicians. One of the experiences that we've had with our current clients is development of a guiding principle. It's almost a contract, if you will, where they developed 5 different principles, and then there were corresponding specifics that they identified within the document. And essentially, it communicated a very balanced framework of responsibilities and expectations that they had of the physicians. And then on the right side of each of those documents and those principles, they're communicating what were the responsibilities of the leadership and the organization in support of how the physicians would operate. And they did something that was highly debatable within this as well, and they made this more of a contractual arrangement and actually worked together to present these guiding principles and then sign a commitment document that allowed them to share ownership in the effort along the way. And they built their entire structure of ongoing physician communication around those guiding principles. It helps offer support and clarity for how the goals and expectations by the physicians will be supported by the organization along the way. The next slide talks a little bit about, for health systems and medical groups that often operate on tight operational margins, physician engagement is sometimes too important to be ignored, and that gets into a conversation about things like ROI. And again, sometimes those can feel like they're mutually exclusive in healthcare, but we're kind of seeing this more and more as an opportunity that these are fully integrated. The satisfaction and the performance of the physician is inherently tied to the marketing activities as well.
Yeah. And I think the one thing I'll add to this section as well is, in today's competitive healthcare industry, you really can't afford to have disengaged employees or disengaged physicians. And I think especially in the hospital world or the multi-specialty medical group world, referral leakage is a big challenge throughout the country. And I think physician engagement is one key factor to help reduce that. And that's one thing as we go a little further into the presentation, you'll see that's one of the recommended data points is to identify the leakage by physician or by specialty and then target that through some engagement strategies. As we relate to perceived challenges, DDM Marketing Communications, we recently spent some time with Dr. Doug Apple, and he is a physician thought leader, has a lot of regional and national recognition. He's currently the Chief Clinical Officer for the Atlantic Group at Bon Secours Mercy Health. And we spent a couple hours with Dr. Apple, and he addressed some key obstacles relating to improved physician engagement. And we'll let you hear from him with a brief clip in his own words, but some of the key points that we got from Dr. Doug Apple is there is not one key metric to use. There needs to be a commitment to two-way communication, and that he feels there's been a lack of true transparency historically. So I'm going to play a brief video clip here so you can hear Doug Apple kind of talk about some of these challenges in his own words. And then just as a side note, we do have longer video clips available if you would like to reach out to me after the webinar, and we can share some of Doug Apple's thought leadership insight, which has been very helpful. So we'll play the video briefly.
So it was really important for us to be able to identify when physicians need to know something. What is it that they need to know? How are we going to deliver that? And make sure that it's done in a bi-directional manner. I've also had physicians tell me it wasn't so much that a decision was made, it was understanding why or how they came to a decision, and then being informed on that. Where we spent most of the time thinking that we had to engage every physician, the reality was not the case. It was really mostly people want to understand what was the problem, what were you doing about it, and thank you for letting me know. And if I had questions, who do I go to?
And I think, like I said, that was just a very small segment of a larger discussion, but it was very interesting. Dr. Apple talking about understanding the why. The physicians need to understand the why and the how. And I think the other thing that was very insightful was Doug's comment that it's not necessary to always engage all physicians, but only engage those that are being impacted. And I think as it relates to communications, physicians get a lot of stuff. They get a lot of mailings, they get a lot of emails, they get a lot of demands for their time. And if you're competing for that time, if you can be short and to the point and relevant, it really helps you get them further engaged and to build the trust that we have talked about, to let them know that your communication matters to them. As we continue a little more specific into the perceived challenges, I think challenge one that we want to touch on is, according to the advisory board research, significant causes of physician disconnect center around group decision making. And maintaining positive engagement requires creating the right balance between quick decisions and taking the time to build consensus and support. Especially in the medical group world, whether it's single specialty or multi-specialty, most physicians are not used to being part of a group culture or group dynamic. They're used to autonomy. They're used to being able to impact decisions often quickly. And I think those of us that have worked in academic health systems, sometimes things don't move that quickly. And I think that's where frustration comes in around the group think or group decision making. But if you, to go back to what Doug Apple said, if you can help them understand the why, the what, and the how, then you can build that consensus to take the time to make the decisions that are needed.
The next challenge relates to funding and resources around supporting physician communications. And it was one we even debated internally a little bit. But Nevertheless, properly investing in an effort for physician communications is going to take a combination of time and potentially some money and resources as well. Having that conversation with executive leadership, physician leadership, and the marketing department potentially, depending on your organization, is really important to be on the same page on how the initiatives are going to be supported. Consumer perception and choice are vital to healthcare systems. However, physicians are still the #1 driving force when it comes to where patients receive their care. And that's, again, there's so much of a blend now between the satisfaction of a physician, how they interact with the patient, and now how we market to them as well. And so there is inherently a partnership that's really necessary now as we talk about physician satisfaction and driving consumer activities.
Yeah, and I think one other thing to add here is it's interesting when you talk about shifting marketing dollars and marketing resources. There was a time for those of us who have been around for a little while where a strategy for healthcare marketing was yellow pages. And I think that's almost comical now to talk about, but I've worked in organizations where hundreds of thousands of dollars were spent on phone directory listings. And you think about that today, it's insane, but I think the thing, you need to realize that not all health systems, hospitals, or medical groups are at the forefront of healthcare marketing, and that's okay. I think it's just recognizing and getting them to move forward to shift those resources to what's really meeting the consumers where they're at.
The third challenge is typically talking about a physician audience being hesitant to embrace the efforts of the organization if they don't seem sincere or aren't transparent. It's important to address the concern, this concern only through the C-suite and making sure they get buy-in. The organization may have motivations like growing service lines, expanding hours, scheduling changes, which are significant shifts in maybe the way the physician's been operating. What they need to know is from the organization, what are the efforts that support their contribution? What's the big picture to the efforts that they're trying to accomplish? How do they provide metrics and feedback loops to the initiatives that they have in mind so that they're aligned with each other as opposed to motivated for the physicians to do more without an understanding of what the organization is doing in support of those efforts.
And one other thing, I think it's important to remember that, physicians are skeptical by nature. Through their mindset and their education, their training, they do question the why. A lot of their decisions are based on science, so they need to understand the why and the how. And I think knowing that's where some of the hesitation comes in, because I know everybody thinks they can do marketing, but it's interesting that physicians just need to understand. And I think once you get them to understand and they can process it in their own terms, you really have the opportunity to get that buy-in from the leadership. Now we're going to talk about some potential goals and objectives. And I think the one thing is, if we all want to be honest, is it may be hard to immediately measure these objectives. And the ultimate goal is to truthfully show that there's been increases in reported levels of engagement from physicians. As we mentioned earlier, the increased engagement leads to increased support of initiatives and referrals. To measure the success of our efforts, it is important to develop tactics that specifically deliver noticeable increases, and we identified the following 3 areas that we recommend to our clients. And the first is there needs to be clear and efficient communication channels for two-way engagement. And I think the one thing you'll hear a lot from physicians, and I've heard a lot personally, there's a difference between two-way engagement and corporate propaganda. If you're asking them to provide feedback versus telling them what they need to do, those messages are really perceived differently. One thing that Jordan and I have touched on throughout this presentation is trust. There needs to be trust, understanding, and respect among physicians and for physicians. And finally, there needs to be trust in the physician leaders to champion these efforts within their areas of influence. Depending on the structure, if you're a medical group or an academic system, you'll likely have division chiefs or department chiefs, section chiefs. If you can get the buy-in and agreement from those leaders to champion these efforts kind of on the ground and in the front lines, it really makes your life as a healthcare marketer a lot easier to have their support. The always fun part of necessary research and data, to truly develop an effective engagement program, you need to have some sort of baseline research to determine areas for improvement and impact. And specifically, you need feedback from the physicians themselves to determine perceptions and levels of the physician involvement in decision making. You know, are they asked to be involved in decisions, or are they told what the decision outcome is? Again, you know, we're really harping on trust. There needs to be trust between the physicians and the administrative leadership. And I think one point of that is especially if the administrative leadership is not a physician leader. You know, there was always historically that back and forth between a hospital administrator and a non-employed physician. So now that you have employed physicians, you still need to be sensitive to that. And then finally, physician satisfaction and commitment to the organization, and specifically, are the physicians satisfied with their physician leadership, and are they satisfied with the internal communications? Do they have what they need to know to do their job better? One thing that we have found works extremely well is to gather this data. It's beneficial to distribute surveys to employed and non-employed physicians on the medical staff to get their feedback. I think we know you won't get a very high return rate for this first one, but to enhance trust and transparency, you should show the results of these surveys with the physicians. And what we have found is historically, the second and third follow-up surveys, you do see a bump in participation because you have been transparent with the results. I think the one caveat is to be sensitive to how often the physicians are surveyed. You know, I think, as I mentioned, they're getting a lot of communication thrown their way, and I would say no more than quarterly at most.
I want to reinforce the element of transparency. We've seen not only within physician communications, but in a number of organizations, that the access to honest information, what's going well, what's not going well, are actually motivators, not demotivators. In the process. The more that they have access to clear data and information, the more that they will play an active role in problem solving as well.
And as we head towards the home stretch here, you know, suggested tactics and recommendations, and these are things that I think Jordan and I agree are very important, that all of your efforts and tactics should really have an underlying focus, again, on developing that clear and efficient two-way communication. From my career, historically, I can't explain to you how important that was to have the communication be truly two-way. Again, you want to build the trust with physicians. And you also, I mentioned about communicating to the physician leaders, you also want activities that will help you identify and develop the next generation of physician leaders. I think you're looking at, you know, the physicians who are new to a leadership role, or who are new to being more than just a practicing physicians. And they're very much influential on their peers, and I think it's important to help identify that, because they will be your future advocates for your work. You know, while these efforts are primarily directed at impacting your internal audience, which is your employed physicians or your medical group or your medical staff, there is always the opportunity to create external awareness as well. And I think one thing that we have found, industry white papers, you know, journal articles, content for physician-specific channels, and media outreach efforts, trade journals such as, you know, the New England Journal of Medicine Catalyst. You know, it's an online version, and it's they're always hungry for content, especially content that addresses these key issues. And I think the goal with any external effort would be to build the recognition of the importance of physician engagement, and to help place your organization at the forefront of this hot industry issue, which ultimately then could even impact retention, recruitment, referrals.
That's one of the things that I wanted to reinforce that John mentioned is, while there's a number of things that are kind of industry focused in getting them involved in some of these activities, inherently as you're building this content, you're equipping your organization as well for possible external interactions. The more that your physicians are sitting down and participating in messaging that might either elevate their peer group, it can also be used in the consumer audience if it's appropriate type of content. And as John mentioned as well, recruitment has become a key component. Them communicating the environment that they're a part of, the culture that they have, their ability to influence it becomes significantly important in their efforts to get more physicians to join that team.
And then now we'll talk about the, you know, the measurement of success. And I think to measure the overall success, we recommend that organizations specifically look at some of the following. And take a look at your percentage increase in physicians who indicate positive engagement. This really will give you that baseline number to grow and also to justify your efforts and requests for resources. I mentioned referral leakage in key specialty areas. You should look to see if there is a percentage reduction after some of your efforts take place. And as well, is there an increase in physicians responding to follow-up surveys? You know, I think that's definitely an opportunity to grow, and I think it's an opportunity that may grow, but it could grow steady. Other areas that show success is there teamwork amongst staff? Are physicians showing that they're satisfied with the teamwork of their practice or of their practice site? Are they satisfied with the performance of hospital administration? You know, I think that's one that probably will be a little controversial, but something that's important to know. And especially for your hospital-based staff who practice in your hospitals, are they satisfied with the nursing staff? I think that's a very key driver and also a key indication of the teamwork between physicians and nurses. Also look at, you know, the belief. Do physicians believe that patients are satisfied with the quality of care they receive? Jordan and I have a lot of anecdotal stories where the physicians thought the patients were very happy, and then in a focus group, the patients indicated they weren't very happy. And just being on the same page and not having to disconnect there. Is the organization, do they care about quality initiatives? And does the organization treat their physicians with respect? I think that's becoming more and more important as more and more physicians are becoming employed. And also, one thing that we have found historically is there a usefulness of the CME programs offered. As we get ready to wrap up here, engaged physicians are trusted partners and front-facing ambassadors of your brand. They can really, really help a marketing communications team if they're on board. So we recommend you trust them, engage them, communicate with them. And the physicians should be able to confidently communicate your organization's promise to the community. The physician is the biggest choice in where a patient receives their care. You know, so if they're promoting your message and they're on brand, that really could make a difference to your reputation. And effective communication helps prepare physicians to be better engaged and better prepared.
To John's point, we've experienced in a number of healthcare relationships where sometimes some of the greatest detractors amongst the physician group, because they don't feel like they're properly being supported, if they're appropriately engaged in the organization, including the marketing department, they actually become some of the strongest advocates. And so I think everything that John is describing, we've seen in kind of direct activity, and it truly is the case that sometimes the squeakiest wheels have become the loudest ambassadors in the future.
Yeah, and I think one thing there too, you know, sometimes simple gestures have the heaviest impact as it relates to a physician's perception if they're treated with respect. And a real quick anecdotal story is I worked at a health system, and it was the controversy around activities to promote and recognize Doctor's Day was amazing. And it was interesting to, one physician said, you know, if you would just have hot soup available for me to grab lunch, because I literally have 5 minutes to eat during my day. And it was amazing that something so simple made such a difference. We had some primary care physicians who said, you know, could you just get me some new modern magazines in my waiting room? Things that really were very low risk. It was very powerful. And then finally, you know, of course, our shameless plug here that choosing a communications partner that has specific experience with physician communication programs is really vital to success in this highly complex area. It is a subset of marketing. It is a subset that I think not a lot of agencies have had experience with, and whether it's DDM or another agency partner, just really look into the experience and see if they know how to communicate and how to relate to that physician audience.
As John mentioned, we'd be happy to share you more specific examples of experiences that we've had with some of our clients in the future. So we look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, and with that now, I'm actually going to stop our screen share and go into a Q&A session. So if there's any questions from the group, now will be the time to enter them in through the chat option. Okay, we see some questions coming in, so thank you. One One of them that we'll address really quickly that a couple people have asked actually is, will we be making the slides available? Yes, after the presentation, we will be sending out a link to get the slides for you to share with your colleagues or to just refresh what we had spoken about. And another question that we have, somebody had asked, have we ever worked with physician advisory councils, and do you find them beneficial as a way to test potential messaging? And from my experience, and then I'll let Jordan answer as well, yes, I have had experience with physician advisory councils, and I found them very, very useful. The caveat is they're as useful as the physicians that are on them. I've been fortunate to work in a few medical groups that had very engaged, very active, very energetic physicians. And it was interesting that we could test messaging with them. We could test the memo, we could test the intranet before we sent it out to the 1,600-member medical group. We had a group of about 30 who really helped guide us as to how our messaging would be received. And I think if you develop those advisory councils, it really helps you not to step on any landmines with your communications.
The other thing that John has mentioned earlier in this conversation is just the opportunity for access. The interaction with the physicians, they may come in with their own preconceived notions and expectations of what they think is a good effort or a good marketing for that matter, but them being involved in learning a little bit about some of the efforts of the organization, of specific departments like marketing, and then being able to kind of see some of the data that's part of that as well. We've really experienced that a lot of the physicians are very data-driven, and so providing appropriate information that helps them see there are more science-based efforts as opposed to just subjective activities around the efforts that support them, the more they become engaged.
And one other question that came in, we were asked that during the presentation we mentioned about sincere communication and asked for a couple examples of that. And I think the easiest way to describe that is it's not the forced corporate messaging that physicians feel is PR speak or feel, I mentioned earlier, it's propaganda. It's really what they need to know to do their job better. It's the right messaging at the right time for them, and I think it's the having the respect for how they want to be communicated with. At one point, physicians loved to be communicated with fax. Now they prefer text messaging. They prefer intranet sites. They prefer mobile, and they prefer digital. So that's kind of the sincere aspect of it is, don't waste their time and just really meet them where they need to hear your message. And I think it looks like those are all the questions we have, so we're probably going to wrap up the webinar, give everybody the gift of a little bit of time here. Like I said, we will be following up with those who RSVP'd and those who attended. And again, I invite you to visit our website, teamddm.com. There's a lot of physician and healthcare information available there. And if you have any questions, please let us know. You have our emails. And thanks again for participating.